Fuck yes. Space Marine 2 is a third-person shooter hack and slash, putting you in the hydraulically actuated, power-armoured boots of a Space Marine of the Adeptus Astartes, super soldiers of the Imperium of Man, sent to the planet Kudaku to protect a magical MacGuffin thingy from several trillion heavily armed, legally distinct xenomorphs and the forces of space hell through the power of interbro bonding and mass murder, with gameplay more addictive than crack cocaine, a short and sweet main campaign playable with your friends which doesn't waste your time, a separate co-op mode complete with leveling and progression, and a PvP mode which, while simple, is a whole lot of fun. Space Marine 2 is a no-brainer, you should buy it like right now. But maybe the calming therapeutic imagery of a Space Marine tearing the head off of a walking demon tank from hell just isn't enough to convince you, yeah, this game's worth it, in which case I'll just have to try harder, I guess. But with all the foreplay out of the way, let's get into the meat. First off, setting. 40k. Warhammer 40k. It's the 41st millennium and everything fucking sucks. The Imperium of Man, humanity's enormous galactic empire, a galactic empire which makes the one from Star Wars look like a nanny state, is quite possibly the worst place to live in all of fiction. Superstition and religious oppression runs rife. Technology is feared and poorly understood, and it has for the last 10,000 years been slap bang in the middle of an endless war against everything and everyone. A war against space elves who could murder you with their brains. BDSM space elves who will turn you into sentient furniture and then laugh at you as you scream. Space orcs who are so dumb it gives them superpowers. Egyptian space terminators who, when they're not wearing your flayed skin as a coat, turn star-eating gods into Pokemon, and many, many more, ranging from the vertically challenged to weep communists with Gundams. But in Space Marine 2 we have the dubious honour of fighting against xenomorphs who can shoot back, the Tyranids, and the forces of space hell, Chaos, complete with 4 different Satans, including Murder Satan, Disease Satan, Big Brain Satan, and Saucy Satan. And who of 4 possible Satans do we have the pleasure of fighting? Tzeentch and his army of magical nerds. You are Lieutenant Titus, Space Marine, and all around pretty cool guy, returning back to service with your old Space Marine chapter, the Ultramarines, after serving in the Death Watch as penance for a false accusation of chaos corruption by your old buddy, your old pal, Leandros.
The Codex Astartes does not support this action.
Shut the fuck up. Sent to the Residius system to fend off an invasion by a Tyranid fleet and protect the magical MacGuffin thingy I mentioned earlier, Project Aurora, at all costs, alongside your new battle brothers, Gardiel and Chiron, whose trust you'll have to earn as you fight your way across the 3 planets of the system, Kudaku, Avarax and Demarium, where we soon learn the Chaos artifact we destroyed in the first game was recovered to serve as the base of an ultimate weapon against Chaos by everyone's favourite cyborgs, the Adeptus Mechanicus, a faction of the Imperium whose entire MO is find Ancient Relic, try to understand Ancient Relic, worship Ancient Relic. Ancient Relic goes wrong. Why does it go wrong? Simple. You didn't pray good enough. Long story short, everything went wrong, and right on cue, Chaos Invasion, led by the Chaos Sorcerer Imra and the Traitor Legion, the Thousand Sons, who want to use the weapon to tear a hole to space hell, the Warp, bring down the Imperium, etc, etc. If this is all sounding a bit familiar to anyone, it's because this is essentially the exact same setup as the first game, but to be honest, Space Marine 2 is just kinda better, with all the graphical enhancements making it even more cinematic than the first game, which was already a really cinematic game. All these awesome little fan servicey moments, callbacks to the original.
The Codex Astartes does not support this action. I am looking forward to it.
Fighting a couple of Carnifexes and a Neurothrope, Chaos Hellbrutes, having Lord of Change take to the field against an army of Astartes and Guardsmen, fighting alongside the Imperial Guard, my boys, complete with their little Leman Russes, a Dreadnought, even the Ultramarines chapter master Calgar at one point. Is the story life-changing? No. Is it fun? Yes, definitely, and the fact that it's short and sweet, around 8 to 12 hours, and didn't waste my time, left me satisfied and wanting more. It ends with a bang too. You and your bros go through literal hell together, and after some ups and downs become true brothers in arms, defeating the Chaos and Tyranid invasions. We get a final reveal that Leandros is the chapter chaplain, and we get a bit of a sequel tease. Titus separates from his brothers, Joining Calgar and Leandros on a mission to parts unknown. Close curtains, roll credits. Space Marine 2 does 40k justice. The scale of the warfare, the factions, the lore, the environments, the music, even down to the little world building moments where you get a slice of life glimpse into what it would be like to live in this setting. And as a fan since I was like 10, it's everything I wanted it to be, and I can't wait for more. But this is a video game, you know, a thing that you play. So how does it play? Splendid. It's tight and responsive with enough complexity to keep you occupied without it feeling overwhelming. Space Marine 2's core gameplay loop has you switching between ranged and close quarters on a dime, depending on the enemy which has had the misfortune of crossing your path. Ranged combat is pretty standard third-person shooter stuff, with the added bonus that every weapon in the game will turn whatever you hit with it into roadkill, and you have a decent couple of boomsticks to choose from. Bolter pistols, bolter carbines, bolter rifles, bolter sniper rifles, plasma weapons like the incinerator and pistol, and the absolute force of nature that is the melter rifle, a weapon I would gladly marry. You also have pickup weapons like the heavy bolters and multi-meltas, which you can find scattered about here and there. They're powerful, but they don't have much ammo, so you know when you get your mitts on them that there's going to be a lot of bugs or demons which want to eat your face. Beyond all that, you also have a few different types of grenades, normal frags, stickies, the melt-a-bomb and shock grenades. But where Space Marine 2 sets itself apart from something like, say, Gears of War, is that the melee plays a big role in combat. When you're not lighting up enemies down range, you'll be fighting swarms of smaller enemies and elites who want to get up in your face, which is where your sidearms come into play, your melee weapon and pistol. Melee is good fun in this game, and it isn't just a mindless gutting sesh either, there's a bit to it. First off, depending on which murder stick you decided to bring with you, you have different combos depending on your number of inputs. Rapid flurries with the knife, slam attacks with the chain sword, wave attacks with the power sword, and big charged AoEs with the thunder hammer or the power fist. You can parry melee attacks as well. Unmarked and blue attacks can be parried. Orange attacks can't, but they can be dodged or rolled out of. Parrying a normal enemy with your irresponsibly massive gorilla arms is just gonna fucking kill him, but elites, you gotta work the blade a bit. Maybe having to parry them a couple of times before you can get a hit in safely. Knocking back an enemy or parrying them repeatedly will let you whip out ye old Glock and go for a gun strike, which will either flat out kill them, giving you armor, or do a big chunk of damage. But how does the combat actually flow? Well, Space Marine 2 uses a similar push-forward approach to combat as the new Doom games, though as you can probably tell, a hell of a lot slower, rewarding measured but consistent aggression over just sitting back and plinking at range. This is mainly due to how the health and the armor work. Your health does not regenerate automatically. It can only be restored by either doing damage or using a Medicae stim. Armor does regenerate, but too slowly mid-combat, especially on higher difficulties, to keep you from getting roundly fucked by everything in a 5-mile radius while you're waiting. But never fear, getting your armor back is only a button press away. Hit him with a gun strike, or for the more fun option, performing executions as often as you can. The executions in Space Marine 2 are as creative as they are wonderfully, beautifully violent. I mean, just look at it. It's so fucking good. And you're going to be seeing it a lot because it gives you damage immunity on the way to an execution and while performing one. It's the best way of keeping yourself alive when you're knee-deep in the middle of an entire swarm, and when you weave it together with the other elements of combat, you can end up being extremely hard to kill. But eventually, something is gonna go wrong, and you're gonna end up shit creek. And when you do, you have your Fury ability. Titus's gives him a health regen and a massive damage increase. While it's slow to regenerate, it's extremely powerful, and can completely turn the tide in your favour if used well. When the combat's firing in all cylinders, it's extremely fun. And the most important thing the combat had to do for me was to make me feel like a Space Marine, and it absolutely did. When you really master the combat, you feel pretty much unstoppable. Notice that I said you feel pretty much unstoppable, not that you are literally unstoppable. This game does not fuck around. I played on Veteran, apparently the intended difficulty, and it was plenty hard enough. And there's a few reasons for this. First off, your bros, well, they're not the brightest. In combat they help, but they don't do nearly enough, and it can leave you as the sole focus of every enemy's aggression. While the game is certainly punishing, there's ways you can make it a little bit easier. Between missions you can change up your loadout, which can help out quite a bit to counter certain enemies. For the first half of the game you're going to be fighting pretty much just Tyranids, which, being bugs, rely on massive numbers to overwhelm you. Swarms of Hormagaunts and Termagants can quickly whittle you down, while ranged and melee warriors can pretty much delete your health. Zorathropes hover in the air, firing ranged psychic attacks and buffing the swarm. Lictors lurk just beyond sight, invisible, waiting to pounce on you from the shadows. And Raveners burrow through the ground and ambush you from below. The unique thing thing about the Tyranids is if you kill a Terminus creature, most of the connected swarm die or fall into disarray, which is really cool attention to the lore. Tyranids also have a few boss creatures, Neurothropes, Carnifexes, and even a Hive Tyrant in the operations mode, and they don't disappoint. They're really fun and they're challenging enough, especially the Hive Tyrant. I've always been a fan of the Tyranids. They're my favourite faction in the setting alongside the Imperial Guard, and Space Marine 2 nails them basically perfectly. The second half of the game has Chaos scuttling. Chaos is good, but generally a lot weaker as a foe, a lot more static even with teleporting, and generally a good bit easier, at least in the campaign. Demons swarm you while Traitor Astartes and Renegade Guardsmen take pot shots at you from a distance. Chaos Sorcerers sit back and snipe. Scarab Terminators can either harass with missiles and bolters or get up close with blades. And Chaos has their own bosses as well. Hellbrutes, a Helldrake, even the main villain of the game, Imra, which are also all good fun. But as fun as single player is in Space Marine 2, it's even more fun co-op. You can play through the entire campaign in co-op, and if you're not hosting, you'll get one of the other bros, complete with their own abilities. But the best of the co-op is in the operations, where you can play through the game parallel to Titus and his squad in the campaign in 6 operations, set during and after the main campaign, taking you through detonating the Prometheum field, assassinating the Hive Tyrant, and hunting down a Helldrake. Operations are a lot harder than the main game, like way harder, but you have some options. You're able to pick a class and level it and its weapons up, complete with perk trees and upgrades, so you can tweak your weapons and class to your liking. And because every class is a little different, there's plenty of replayability and fun to be had. But what surprised me more than anything else in this game is how fun its PvP is. Eternal War is awesome. It's just good, back to basics, chaotic fun. And this is despite it being a bit bare bones, having only 3 maps and 3 modes, TDM, King of the Hill and Domination. It's a great time, and it brings me back to the simpler days of the 360, where the only thing you were playing for was fun, some new weapons and character customization. And on the point of the drip, it's fully customizable and can end up being fucking immaculate. All the classes come across from operations, minus the skill trees and the weapon upgrades, and this can make the balance feel a little bit all over the place, but honestly, that's kind of part of the fun. Basically everything is kind of broken in some way, but when everything's busted, nothing is. Except for shock grenades, they're fucking dumb. I would like to see more stuff though, more maps, more modes, more customization, especially for our Chaos bros. They have pretty much nothing. Where are my noise marines, man?
This quiet offends, Slanesh!
And on the purely mechanical side, PvP also brought to light the need for the option to switch shoulders. Depending on which side of the map you're on, you're just at a big disadvantage, and the inclusion of switching shoulders would remedy that. But it's a great foundation, and most importantly, it's fun. There's no headache-inducing movement mechanics, no dumb broken tech. It's slower paced, thoughtful and methodical, and it plays a lot like the old Gears of War games, minus the cover and executions. I haven't played a PvP game in a long time that was as straightforward and fun as Eternal War, and it's a breath of fresh air, even with its shortcomings. Space Marine 2 is a surreal experience, like it's plucked from a parallel universe where gaming stayed the same as it did on the 360, minus looking better. Space Marine 2 has no microtransactions. It's a feature-complete full package, which will satisfy the single-player co-op and PvP crowds equally, and with more content to come in the future, I think Space Marine 2 has a very bright future ahead of it. Before I finish off, I have to discuss how the game actually runs. On a top-end rig, it runs pretty much perfectly, maxed out, with only the occasional frame rate drops here and there, and even then not massively severe. On more modestly spec'd machines and consoles, it can also run decently well, though obviously with way more hitching and frame rate drops, which can, on occasion, bring you down to the low 30s at a 60 FPS target, though that is hardly surprising given how detailed the game is and how much it has to render on screen at any one time. It's both GPU and CPU heavy, so depending on your machine, running this at a consistent 60 FPS might not be possible with or without cuts to your graphic settings. The gist of it is, it's hard to run, so don't be surprised if you have to make the odd change here and there in your settings. Space Marine 2 is such a treat, and I loved my time with it. This is just a good, fun game. In single player with buddies and in its multiplayer, it captures 40k in all of its wild, insane glory, doing justice to a universe that I and many others love to bits. Space Marine 2 is a trip down memory lane to a time when games were simpler, more straightforward. You played it, you enjoyed it, you finished it, you moved on, and looked forward to more like it. Space Marine 2 is proof that Games Workshop has sorely underused its IP outside of the tabletop, and people want more of this shit. I've wanted more for 13 fucking years, but better late than never, I guess. Space Marine 2 is great. you should buy it. This is not a request, but a requirement. The big E demands it. But I won't keep you all any longer. Like, comment and subscribe if you enjoyed, and as always, take care and cheerio.